Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the author series on the Success Inside podcast. Our guest today is Diane Klutz. We had the pleasure of interviewing Diane in 2019 when she had just re-released an illustrated version of her debut novel, Round Eyes, An American Nurse in Vietnam. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about Diane and her background and her book when she was on our podcast, and let her kind of share a little bit more about that. But it was a pleasure to find out that Diane had just authored her newest book. And I tell you, when I saw the word Martini and I saw the name of her publishing company, Two Olives, I thought, I'm in. One of my pleasures at 5 o'clock. So, Diane, it's a pleasure to have you back on what is now the author series on the Success Inside podcast.
Thank you, Howard. You say that. Yeah, a lot of people brings a smile to their lips, so to speak. So yes, it's great being back and seeing you again.
Yes, fantastic. Yeah, you were episode, I believe it was 48 back in 2019, which seems like such a long time ago. And so I love that you now have this new book, Martini Alley, and I'm just very excited to learn more about this book and what it's all about. But first, I would love if you could share a little bit about your background for our new listeners that did not have yet the pleasure to listen to our first episode together. So take it away.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Basically, I am a not retired, but I nursed. I was a nurse for about 48 some years. I guess once a nurse, always a nurse. I'm a Vietnam veteran, hence my first book, Round Eyes, An American Nurse in Vietnam. And I have my PhD in nursing. It's one of those things that it takes you forever to get it. And then after I finally made that great achievement, I decided I didn't want to teach anymore and I didn't want to nurse. So I just quit and decided at that point, that was in 2012, I think, that I wanted to, I was just going to, because I was writing the Round Eyes book at the time. So I wanted to finish it. I've written another book, which is a whole other story. Went through several scams on the second book.
Mm.
So I am back to, I can give a whole lesson in what to
Oh,
avoid.
we're going to talk a little bit about that. Trust me on that.
but yeah, and then really in 2012 was when some of these episodes from Martini Alley first occurred. And so it's
Mhm.
taken me 10 years to get it all wound up, but
Okay.
I'm glad I did.
Okay. Now, I recall in our first episode, and I think you allude to it a little bit for our listeners, when you go out to Diane's website, and we're going to provide a link to it later. Well, I'll give it to you right now. What the heck? DianeKlutz.com. She has a page there about a shopping cart where you have the books and you can read about it. Let's just say Diane is being a little bit conservative about her exploits. Well, maybe not, because I haven't heard anything from Martini Alley yet, but let's just say she was in her younger years as the Army nurse. You were a little wild there, I think.
It kept going as the first chapter in Martini Alley. Well, yeah, once I met my husband, it went downhill after that.
Right. And the rest, as they say, is a long, long story and
Oh,
history. And now,
yes.
for our listeners, by the way, so you met when you were both back from your tours in Vietnam, and you met on a base?
Yes, we met at Fort Gordon, Georgia,
Okay.
and both of us were short timers, meaning he was out before me. And gee, it just so happened that I was housed right across the hall from him at the bachelor's officers' quarters. And I was the only, well, there was one other female officer housed there, and the rest of it was full of guys. So what can I
Okay.
say?
Well, yeah, it's like, I'm like, for you, that's like great odds here. And now
Yeah.
I heard I recalled you had a little adventure in a certain swimming pool.
Well, yes, well, I was raised with 3 brothers, the only
Okay.
girl,
Okay.
and out in rural Pennsylvania. But I could never, I couldn't pass up a dare. You
Right.
don't dare me to do anything.
Okay.
And so a bunch of us had been out partying at the local Augusta, Georgia. It's called the Partridge Inn,
Okay.
and came back early. And Stephen, not my husband at the time, but Stephen said, in fact, as we had never dated, I hadn't been there that long. He said, "Oh, I know what. Let's go skinny dip in the officers club pool. I know the major who runs it." Well, nobody would do it. And of course, then he goes to the dare, double dog dare. Well, that was it. I said, "I'm going." So yes, we did. It was locked up, of course, and huge chain link fence up over it, but we crawled up over it and was in the pool. And well, needless to say, we heard sirens. The next thing, the MPs are flashing
Right.
their little lights at us. So
Uh-uh.
yes, we got
Okay.
caught.
All right. Well, we'll leave it at that and to everybody's
Yes.
own imagination. So I'm curious, when you retired back in 2012, had you begun and you were to round eyes then, or had that been in the works? You were finishing it up. Uh, how did that book come about for you then?
Yes, I was finishing it up, and I think that, well, fact is, I that last year, yes, so in 12, um, I had completed it. But it came about because my uncle, who had written several books, he's retired naval captain, and he kept saying, "Diane, you need to write some of these stories. They're kind of interesting or kind of this." And I had 2 brothers with me in Vietnam. Actually,
Mhm.
we crossed paths there. So there's not 3 of us at the same time, but within a month of each other.
Okay.
And so then I was able to come back early. So I completed my 6 months here. But yeah, so it was I just, but by that time, and I could get into whole other things, but it was a cleansing. It was a cleansing sort of for me,
Okay.
to be
Okay.
honest.
Oh, I can appreciate that. I mean, so many went through some horrific experiences, and it just you were all changed from the point you got there to coming back. And so I know, remember the second book, you had shared some illustrations with me. We had that in the show notes, and so again, I appreciate that. How did what was the premise for you in writing Martini Alley? Is why that book?
Well, we my husband and I like gin martinis, okay.
Okay.
And so we always said, Martini Alley's a neat name. And so in our 50s, we decided to take up boating and went
Yeah.
through the whole thing.
Uh-huh.
But the actual premise, or why I wrote the book and compiled all this stuff, is we had this big trawler named Martini Alley.
Uh-huh.
And one particular, the one story, let me say, and I had it published in the Island Moon, which is down in near Port Aransas in Texas. But after we came back from it, the whole thing was just so wild. I sat down and just kind of compiled the story. And I sent it to my family, just saying, "Oh, you won't believe this," and sent this rough thing out. Well, it just kept more people, and then they would share it with other people, and I was getting all this stuff. So when the second episode happened, not long after that, I wrote that up, and then the Island Moon said, "Hey, we want to run this." So that came on, and and then we moved up here to Sun City. I live in Sun City, Georgetown now, and in Texas, and kind of published them in um, there's a local magazine, and published them. And friends kept saying, "Well, you got to write more." So I started sitting down, and in the meantime, we'd had these other things. I actually had journaled,
Mhm.
like the god awful long trailer thing, like Lucy and Desi going off the side of a
Oh,
cliff.
I wanna hear that. We're gonna talk about that because that coming out here to Vegas, That means a lot, and I know exactly that
Oh,
episode you're talking
I bet it
about
does.
yes.
But anyway, so yeah, it just started with some of my journals and some of my stuff, and then trying to remember, and friends saying, "Oh my gosh, do you remember this one?" And I'm like, "Yeah, hello." And so yeah, I was, and of course, like anything, Mark Twain never let the truth get in the way of a good story,
Of course.
and so you have to embellish some of it, but hey, you have to tell stories.
Sure.
And to be honest, I wanted to make people laugh. And I
Okay.
think I just, everything is so, ugh. So I wanted to bring laughter.